While many of us yearn for truth and understanding, the systems we participate in often prevent us from attaining genuine freedom in our everyday lives. As we move away from organized religion, we begin to recognize patterns. We believe that addressing many of these challenges requires us to examine all aspects of our lives, including toxic leaders, toxic, dangerous organizations, our mental well-being, the things we learn on the journey. Regardless of your belief system, we encourage you to unlearn anything that doesn't benefit you. This will lead to healing and uncover a new way forward. J.D. Forehand is the son of a preacher and an overseas educator. Stuart Delony is a former pastor who currently podcasts and blogs at the Snarky Faith community. Karl Forehand is a former pastor who runs the Desert Sanctuary, a home for spiritual nomads, with his wife, Laura. Disclaimer: we view ourselves as practitioners on a journey of discovery rather than as experts. While we strive to transparently share our experiences and the lessons we're unlearning, we will also refer you to professionals when necessary. Trusted guides will arrive when you need them. Feel free to send your thoughts, concerns, and necessary corrections to Karl or Stuart. You can also visit our Facebook page, The Unlearning Curve, The Unlearning Curve, podbean.com.
We're back again for another session of the Unlearning Curve. And just a reminder that you can find our Facebook page, The Unlearning Curve. Is it The Unlearning Curve or The Unlearning Curve Podcast? Facebook page. Which one, Karl?
The last one.
The last one.
With
Okay.
all the words.
Okay, The Unlearning Curve Podcast. That is, you can find our Facebook page for that. Also, The Unlearning Curve Podcast at gmail.com if you have questions or anything else for us. Or if you just feel like calling in, just writing in to say you guys are a bunch of heretics and you're going to burn in hell. Fine. We'll take it. We'll take it. We take love in all different ways, shapes, and forms. There's also the Unlearning Curve Podcast that is also on YouTube if you want to be able to watch instead of listen. So in our session 2, Karl, I know you've got on our list too, we're going to be talking about, we had previously talked about some of the worst of the evangelical or religious leaders, and now we're going to be talking about what about destructive cults or cult-like organizations that we're dealing with in life. Getting very culty today.
Yeah. It's those organizations that kind of stand out, right? What makes them stand out is really, really bad. And all religion is controlling to some degree. You know, all of them have their things, but who are the worst of the worst? That's what we've been trying to focus on. I started with the Southern Baptist Conventions where I come from. So that's a good place to start. But what are, some of the other ones that are really bad?
The first one that popped to my head, and I don't even know if it totally fits with cult-like organization, but I was just saying social media in general just kind of feels like we're trapped in a hellscape of nothingness, with people just raging at each other and being angry all the time, and people just making money off us as we're doing such. And it feels like, we're being manipulated and et cetera, et cetera. I don't know. Which is great that I'm mentioning this after I just mentioned you guys can find us on
find us
on Facebook. You can, just everywhere you get your cult-like information, we're there.
Get it only from us.
Yeah.
Don't unfollow everyone else, only us.
Yeah. One of the biggest ones for me is the Independent Fundamentalist Baptist, which is also part of my origin story. Because I went to junior high at a Independent Fundamentalist Baptist church with private school, which was also a part of that organization. And they were the people that kind of worshiped Jack Hyles in Hammond, Indiana, who's a really toxic person and controlling, negative. And then that is attached to that also is the Institute for Basic Life Principles with Bill Gothard. Who the Duggars follow and all of those guys, where, it's just kind of a sea of toxicity. Those in the Institute for Basic Life Principles, where they promote, really, diminishing women's role in anything, and those kind of things, having lots of kids.
Quiverful.
Women are creating the quiverful, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Jim Bob and Michelle and the 19 kids and all that. And we were watching another quote unquote reality show, and just realizing they could never live in the Alaska bush without being on a reality TV show about the bush where they got enough money. And the same was true with the Duggars, right? When they got all that attention, Discovery or whoever it was built them the house that they live in. But most of those other kids and people around live in poverty because just having kids like it's going out of style and, committing to the controlling patriarchal system. Those kind of things really, when it gets into child abuse and grooming women to become baby machines, things like all of that stuff's what upsets me the most.
Reminds me of, you were talking about earlier about FLDS. It's the same thing. They teach them basically, have a bunch of babies. Most of them live in poverty, do a bunch of child labor, and basically feed off the state. A lot of them are unwed mothers, technically, because they're not allowed to have polygamy, and then they just live off of welfare. So it's always funny about the projection of the religious right saying these welfare queens and all this stuff, and and usually what they mean by that is like women of color who are single moms who generally tend to actually use less welfare. Biggest welfare recipients, by the way, statistically speaking, are white women. But I'm in favor of the welfare state, but it's always just seems like there's quite a lot of projection there. But yeah, same kind of thing. Very, very cult-like. Very keep everyone except for the handful of men at the top quiet, and we'll just do whatever we want.
Yeah, thanks, JD. I was really trying for this. I was trying to just court some people for ads for the podcast, and the LDS Church was big on my list. I was like so close. I was so close to glory. I could almost hear the angel Moroni blowing the trumpet. But
I would say we could get sponsored by them, but let's not get any O-rings from them because the Challenger didn't do very well with that.
But interesting like that. You made me think of my dad had a guy he worked with. This is I'm probably back in high school, and he was like an elder in an LDS church. And I remember just the way he would talk about women was so weird to me. The one phrase that stuck with me was when he was like seeing a woman go by and said, "Oh, she's got good breeder hips."
Ugh.
And I was just like, even like as a kid, I was like, what? Yeah, this is insane. This guy's like an elder in the church, but he's, it's, like it's, I guess the same way farmers look at cows and other things like, oh yeah, she's gonna do quite well this season here. But it's so gross. It's so gross and dehumanizing that, conversations like that even happen, and any of that even makes sense for people to live in things like whether it's a Duggars, whether it's
Another aspect of that is the influence. And you notice that with Jim Bob Duggar Red, is that his name? Jim Bob ran for office. His son ran for office, the one that got caught with the porn and so on. But in that type of, they want to influence politics, especially at the local level. So that church in St. Joseph, Missouri, nearby here, that they got the gay pastor removed from the library board just because he was gay. They are actively involved in trying to control local politics. We talked about Tony Lambert. And again, I'm not trying to make Tony Lambert out to be a bad guy overall, but just his doctrines. But he also talks about influence the influencers. So they want to get involved at the local levels of politics and just throw a lot of conservative evangelical people into local politics. And what you end up with, and people may disagree with me, but you end up with the dumbest people in politics trying to lead things. You can see that at all levels now. It's not most intelligent, qualified, responsible people that are wise, that can run things. We just want people that can swing, especially the abortion vote, towards us. And I mean, that started in the 80s strong, and it's continued on till today. And you just get churches too engaged in politics and promoting getting our way over doing anything noble. They think it's noble to do that, but it isn't, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I think I I used to do politics podcasts, and that was the big thing that we pushed all the time is you should just get involved in local politics instead of spending time online in the cult of Zuckerberg or of Musk, and instead just do something local, because you're gonna have a lot more impact in that way than you are by screaming on Twitter or something where it's all just going into the void and it's all just numbers going up on a ticker for some billionaire in Silicon Valley. I think you can, whatever it is, whether it's canvassing or running for office or whatever, running for a school board, you're going to get a lot more done in that way. And I hope people try to do that. But it's a little, I mean, I understand it's a lot easier to sit on Twitter and complain about stuff. It's a pretty daunting task to try to run for even local office. And it takes a lot of money, unfortunately, because America loves putting a bunch of money in politics.
Well, I mean, yeah, you're right about that with being local. When I was canvassing during the last election, the one thing that got me was so much of it, people would be so passionate about like the top line race and know nothing about anything else, and just assume that the presidency is going to fix everything for them somehow, that like as if like local stuff doesn't also have a huge impact on it. And it would surprise me how, yeah, you'd have people that would have no clue in very important races too, that impact like education and so many other things. But yeah, we're only paying attention to one thing, the top line. And now it feels like, especially for conservative politics, it's about just being as loud and obnoxious and offensive as possible, which you'd mentioned too, that it's funny that they're all against DEI nowadays. And they're all about merit-based hiring, but you've got a bunch of idiots, as to your point, JD, that they're putting in positions that don't know anything about the positions they're going into. And that sounds more like DEI than merit-based to me.
Yeah.
But hypocrisy reigns, as it always does.
Indeed. Yeah, for sure. I think there was probably a difference in what JD said of getting involved in politics, being responsible, help standing up for the good or whatever you believe in. But there's a difference in that and just saying we want people that represent our specific religious view and we want to force that on other people. That's our goal, is to influence the influencers. So we'll have more people in church, so people will think like us and things like that. So we can make money. So we can make some money.
It is, because from being a person that worked for an evangelical organization, that we were literally trying to do evangelism. That was like our whole goal. I mean, sometimes it just becomes about the numbers and checking off boxes really quick. And it has nothing to do with, do they understand it? Is there more to this? Is there a greater anything more to this? No. We just check the box, move on to the next person. And it's very much assembly line, how we handle evangelism that way too. Because it's just, yep, I can't spend too much time with you. No. I got to keep moving. But what we're peddling is so flimsy and so thin. I think that we end up having to then posture up in order to defend it. Not us, but they do, because they don't half the time even know what they're talking about.
Yeah. So Trump's a great model of it because he just sensationalizes. He's like a pastor that sensationalizes everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And pastors are good at that. Politicians are good at that, where they create an image of the people out there. When you live in a small town like we do, you actually get to talk to those people who are in the world, and they're not that much different than you. And even though they hate the football team that's 8 miles away, that's exactly like them, right? But when you get to know them, you know that they're basically good people, maybe misinformed about politics or religion and so on. But you see that it's not the world out there. But in politics and religion, we demonize everybody that's different than us.
Mm-hmm.
We otherize them. And when you can do that, you can basically get away with mostly what you want to, because it's seen as a greater good, where it's really kind of semantics in a way, in my opinion.
I think it's also why we got to log off the internet, because online it's all about dunking on people, and you don't get, it's just searching through people's tweets to find the one thing that they said wrong, and things like that. Whereas when you, it's the classic thing where it's just like, you can be a keyboard warrior, like to bring this to like a totally different realm. It's just like I've had people, that are, talking about online, oh, if I saw you in person, I'd beat you up, blah, blah, blah. And then, you see those people in real life and they're just like, oh, hey, man. It's just like, okay, it's all bluster. But point being is that if you do get involved in the local level, whether it's helping people deconstruct or whether it's politics or whatever, a lot of that stuff falls away. When you talk about hating the football team from 8 miles away, yeah, we do that on Friday nights. But when you run into those people at the convenience store, you don't do that. You don't go, your team sucks. Like, you're just like, hey, man, what's up? Like, how you doing? Like, people fundamentally, in most cases, besides, the most extreme cases of like psychopathy, like when you see another person, you're generally going to be like, okay, you're also a person. I see your humanity. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a big reason why I've, for the most part, just like tried to limit my online time, because I see it in myself sometimes where I just see people say something stupid. I'm like, I have to destroy this person's existence. And then I'm just like, no, I actually don't. I've gotten to where if I am going to say something negative, I just log off, but I always just try to say the most positive thing. Like, the only thing I basically post about now is like photography, and people, everyone's an expert, just like everything on the internet. And so they come to me and they'll be like, oh, nice picture, but I would have done this, this, and this. And I'm like, okay, I appreciate the nice words. Thanks for the advice. Even though I'm like, the advice you gave is stupid. You're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about. Look at your pictures. They're all shit, or you don't have any pictures. And so, but like, that's thoughts for my head. And then, but what I need to give them is something nice, and then just go away. That's all I need. If I see that person in real life, then yeah, we can have a conversation. But one sentence replies to each other online is only going to make it more vicious, and no one's going to benefit from that ever.
Mm-hmm. And I think when we get into those us and them situations, what it does is it kills any amount of discourse. And so then it drives us each to our polarized sides, where we sit and we just cook on or stew what we have. They do the same on theirs. And there's never any like crossing of things. There's never any like crossing of ideas. And when we end up siloed like that, I feel like in many ways, both sides get dumber.
Yeah. And a lot of times you're just building up a straw man in your head. And this happens in real life too. Like, even when I text people and they reply something and it's not how I thought it, or they worded it weird and I wasn't expecting it. Oh, they must be thinking this and they must be thinking this. And I'm thinking a thing. And then like majority of the time they come back and say something that I'm like, oh, okay. And it totally diffuses it. But it's, for the most part, if I have some interaction like that, obviously when it's online with strangers, you can't do this. But when it's with friends and stuff, I'll just be like, hey, can we call? Like, let's just do a call. Cause like, I'm getting anxious because of some nonsense, weird situation that I've constructed in my head that's probably totally off base. And I think that's why having those like face-to-face, or at least like speech-based conversations is so much better. Because I don't know, as a person who overthinks everything, it's so easy to get in my own head and just create these nonsense straw men of people or situations, and it's not good. I don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
So we tend to sit in front of a political person or a pastor. We listen to their assessment of the outside world, the assessment of the other, and we just kind of soak that in. It would behoove us to become more educated in all areas. Mm-hmm. And my group, if you made me list a group right now that's under my skin, is the Latin Mass Catholics, or trad cats, Harrison Butker, J.D. Vance, those type of people that just want to encourage women to stay home, and they're moving down that path, but
trad cads, that's what they're like. Cats.
Yeah.
Like a cat. It almost just sounds like a traditional catheter is like what they're going after. Like,
right.
Oh, like,
that's right. It's
what it feels like to me.
Self-lubricating trad cats.
Uncomfortable, and in most cases unnecessary.
Yeah. That would make sense if they're all like are catheterized And that's why they're so uncomfortable normally
Yeah,
in
that's
normal
right.
life.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm
They
sorry,
need-
Karl. Trad
Need someone
cats.
at home to take care of them.
Yeah, but I mean, most of my deconstruction journey has been learning about things I didn't know about.
Mm.
You know, we talked about certainty in the last episode. You know, should I be certain? You know, or should I, like a scientist or anything else, admit what I don't know? Like you said, Stuart. So, you know, let's get smarter. We have mentioned before, we have all the information at our fingertips. We can go do actual research, and research doesn't mean doing a Google search. You know, it's more than that. It's going to take a little longer than that, than just what you can do in 5 seconds. And JD is a big proponent of that. But let's get smarter. You know, and do a little research, do a little homework. And I think, you know, number one, you'll be more accepting of people you don't understand, you don't quite, you know, associate with. You'll understand where they're coming from a little better. But in some cases, you find out what's wrong with, like, your own denomination and things like that. And you got to be willing to do that in search of the truth over just making myself comfortable. And it's us versus them. We're right and God is on our side. So let's make everybody else shut up.
Yeah, but it's hard. It's hard work and it's uncomfortable. That's why a lot of people don't want to do it. I mean, to take it back again to like my high school students, it's like that they just want me to tell them the answers because it's so much easier if I just tell them the answer. What I teach social sciences, there isn't an answer, but it's so much easier if I tell them that as opposed to them actually having to go out and do the work. But what a lot of them that do put in the work find out is that when they get done, they understand everything much better. And if they don't understand something, they have the skills to do the research that can give them at least some better understanding, if not whatever the answer is. But yeah, it's uncomfortable at first. People like easy answers and people like being comfortable, which I understand, but it's bad.
What Stuart said, I don't know. It may be the key. Yeah. One of the keys to wisdom is admitting you don't know. That's what scientists do. It's what genuine seekers do. It's what mystics do. You know, they say, I don't know. This is what I'm experiencing. This is how I experienced it. This is what I saw. This is what I heard. This is what and admit what you believe, because what you believe is not fact. What you believe is just what you assume. But also be very strong. What Stuart said, I don't know.
And it's
even with my wife.
Where were you last night, Karl? I don't know.
No.
No, but I think it's stepping into us being more comfortable with ambiguity and or mystery or other parts of it too.
Uncertainty.
And it's hard. It's hard because, I mean, I think those of us that have been raised around religious institutions that are fairly rigid within that, certain, you know, it's antithetical to anything that we've been raised with for being, I'm not sure. You know, or even some days, there's days where I'm just like, I've got days where I certainly feel like an agnostic a lot of times, and I'm not even sure what that, where I'm at a lot of days with it, but it's a wrestling and it's a walking things out.
Belief means being committed to something I don't know, right? So I can't prove, and a guy named Brady that we interviewed kind of stressed that point with us, that you can't know that strongly about God and the afterlife. It's an assumption, right? You can't prove that. You can say you can because it's in your doctrinal statement, or you can interpret the Bible a certain way, or your holy book, whatever you're talking about. But belief is not fact. You can believe it. You can believe like it's a fact, and that may give power to your group or your movement or your pastor. And you may feel that it's empowering you, but it's not.
But I know it's real.
Yeah.
I know.
That's what you're saying is I hope it's real. Yeah. And I strongly hope it's real. I'm betting everything on it.
I'm afraid it's not.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah. scared about the consequences and the repercussions for myself if it's not, is
Right.
what I think. And that's not true for everyone, but I think it is true for some people. Because I used to be in this chat group, speaking of unhealthy relationships. Yeah. But we used to argue about stuff, and this guy would get out of church, and then he'd just pop in the group and just go, well, man, just really experience God. He's like, and we all know this is real. And I was like, I don't. He's like, you know it though. Deep down, you know it. And I was like, I don't. No, I don't know that. And he's like, no, we all know the God of the Bible. This guy, by the way, is like a weird right-wing atheist now. So he clearly didn't know. But
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. You don't either.
yeah, but
You don't know it.
That's my thing. It's just like, yeah, it's tough to get away from that stuff, but it's necessary.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't. It's frustrating for me because I don't know how you get people, besides long form, many hours of conversation. I don't know how you get people to that point where they're able to be vulnerable enough to say, I'm not sure, or I think, or currently I believe this, but I'm open. How to open those people up, because there's a lot of people with very flimsy evidence that believe very strongly in certain things.
Mm.
I think as people get older too, it gets more difficult, because again, with my students, I notice when they're not overly like religious or anything, but when they talk about this is the way something is in history or psychology, it's not that difficult to present them with other evidence, get them to read it, and then for them to go, okay. And I try to instill that I just always argue devil's advocate for almost everything. They'll argue something, and then I'll argue the opposite way. And then they're like, hey, actually, that's right. You had some good points. I agree with you now. And then I'm like, well, I disagree with that point now. Actually, and I just go from the exact opposite point. And they're like, why do you always do this? I'm like, because that way you don't just believe whatever I tell you, because I'm not some arbiter of like ultimate truth. Like, you feel free to bring other things. But I think, especially for young people, you have to have that. And I think for me, that was a big thing, is having that kind of like openness and grace where people can accept you pushing back on it and not just freak out. But I don't think we have enough of that in the world, and especially when it comes to hierarchies, whether that's religion or education or politics or whatever it is. And I don't have a magic bullet to how to get there, but I think that's something we really need to figure out.
Is it about creating like some sort of intellectual safe spaces? Or spiritual? I don't mean it like that big, but it's kind of finding those that you can talk to. And I think that, if I was giving someone else advice, I think it would just be continue to let your curiosity lead you into this. Like, if they're your questions, lean into it, move into it. It's okay. There's not a slippery slope that leads you straight to hell. Well, maybe there is, but I don't know.
A lot of the traps to all this are still inherent in progressive Christianity, just like they were in fundamentalism. We can fall into the same traps when we can't admit that we're still on a journey that we don't know. Like you guys have pointed out, the same traps are there in any organization. There's a lot of pressure on leaders of organizations to have the answers and to know the answers and believe the answers and prescribe. And even with my wife Laura, sometimes she'll ask me, and I don't think she takes it as the eternal word or anything like that, but she always asks me, what do you think about this? And it feels weird to me still, after 8 or 10 years of deconstructing and questioning, to say to her, I don't know. I really don't know. And she always accepts that. She doesn't, it's not her putting pressure on me, it's me putting pressure on myself. When I was the pastor, you're supposed to have the answers. In a fundamentalist environment, the man's supposed to lead the family and be the ultimate and all those things. So it's so important to say we don't know.
I think even in the language of like the journey and not to say that you can't use that language, but it's even can be problematic in that, because that kind of insinuates that there's a destination.
Yeah.
And is there? There is, in terms of like there's like demarcations of we want to gain more knowledge and learn things, but is there a final destination? Because has anyone ever figured it out? I don't think so. I would argue no. People have learned a lot of things. People have become experts in certain fields, but even those people, there are other experts that disagree with them. So
how do you become enlightened in 3 steps or less? Right?
yeah. Yeah.
If I could write that book,
Yeah.
sell a lot.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
Because Karl, there's a lot of enlightenment money out there that we can. If we're talking about this, it is just waiting for you. It's ripe for the picking.
We do tend, Laura and I tend to kind of regurgitate, well, what are we learning?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and what, like all these people I interviewed about abuse, what did they say? And that's a collection, to me, that's a collection of wisdom. It's not absolute, right? But it's hints at stuff. I remember someone in deconstruction talking about hints and guesses, you know, and things that you see along the way. It's still okay to say we're discovering this. You know, we had a good discussion. Man, I really think that. I think that's where we should be moving. But you got to get out of the everything is absolute, and there's an absolute answer, and it's available in this book that's 2,000 years old. You know, whatever. Whatever your process is, stay. The very first advice I got in deconstruction was stay on the journey and be at peace. Okay, so, but I don't think that person was saying there's a specific place you got to get to, and when you get there, you'll be an Orthodox Christian. You'll be okay. You know, because that's what some of them have done. Yeah, that told me that. But anyway,
no, but I think it's good, and I think for so much of this, thinking of like that deconstruction journey. It kind of even goes back to us and what our personal identity. And you know, I think when we're talking about all of this about how we can have patriarchal systems and all of this, but I think what comes down to it is we tend to ascribe identity out of these groups that we're a part of. And I think as you begin to deconstruct and stuff, we become okay with not needing that to be part of me anymore. And I think it's very freeing, but it can also, I think it makes other people that aren't there uncomfortable because now you've moved. Oh, you're not in this box anymore. You've moved away from that. I'm not comfortable with you anymore. But I think it's just having that, the flexibility also to keep asking questions, keep leaning into it, and you're not going to figure it out right away, and you may never, and that's okay.
Not only will people be uncomfortable with you leaving, you will also experience some discomfort because there's a certain amount of post-traumatic stress. Who am I? Identity crisis. What do I do? Who am I? What do I believe? So you're going to have to go through that. But hopefully what comes out later is you're going to get more authentic. You're going to discover what you really think and what you really believe and what you can really prove, right? So that's a journey that keeps going, but you will experience some of that anxiety, maybe, right?
Yeah, and through that, you do build like a more genuine sense of self and like an actual identity as opposed to pots and pans thrown together that are other people's ideologies that you're internalizing, but aren't really what you actually believe or what you view as yourself. I think that will make the process of whatever deconstruction or identity building easier after you go through that the pangs of being uncertain. Then there is more certainty when I know, okay, at the base level, I believe this such and such and such and such, and certainly that has to be open to further interpretation or increased understanding, but it at least gives you an actual foundation as opposed to, you know, odds and ends thrown together from something that someone told you to believe, but you don't actually believe it because it's just kind of kind of dictated to you from on high.
I like when Richard Rohr talks about the second half of life, the 2 halves of life. You know, we spend the first half developing our identity, career, children, so on. The second half of life, then he calls it falling upward, but where you become more authentic and you challenge things and so on. But he says that's precipitated by a dark night of the soul, that a crisis happens in the middle of that. that causes you to rethink everything. And those of us on the other side, it's a beautiful thing, and glad we did it. But like we've continued to talk about, and I hope we continue to say, it's hard work. Like JD just said, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be worth it, but it's not easy. Just like things.